Joys of, okay, we've got it. All right, we are live. I think this is Senate Finance. And yes, we're live. I'm not seeing
Here we are.
We've got a small thing on the screen. Okay. We are live. This is Senate Finance on January 9th. And we are going to take up some testimony from the two cities that were probably have the largest impact from the July flooding. I've looked out for some of the smaller cities, but I know they've already been into economic development and they're going into gov ops, and I think they might have better things to do than to tell us the same thing again. So we're looking at this, I think, in terms of taxing. We've got some tax bills in here that will work on some of these issues. And just trying to get a handle on, we're gonna have the schools in the rest of the week, trying to get a handle on what their fiscal condition is, what's driving the possible 18% property tax increase. Plus, I'm hearing that there may be some significant municipal property tax increases. And then see if we can figure out what to do about it. So, Bill Fraser, it's yours. Come on up. If you want to bring anyone with you, just
She begged not to be brought with.
okay. She can just signal you from the
Yeah,
side.
exactly. I just got
And
the
it
coach.
has started snowing. It's snow.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Bill Fraser. I'm the city manager in Montpelier. Have been since Senator Cummings was Mayor Cummings. And so you can credit or blame her.
Shortly after that, went from there to here, so.
Exactly, that's right. It's been here ever since. So it's my pleasure to speak with you today. I think you have a copy of the very brief summary that I provided to your staff. I don't have a long presentation other than to say that the city. So what I was asked to speak about was the financial impact of the summer flood, specifically on Montpelier. And for us, at least, the major impact is in the budget, is in the year that we are in right now. So our fiscal year that ends June 3rd. We have already had the city council do a $1.5 million budget rescission in our current year, which basically means all the things that people want. We're holding back on projects and equipment and all those things that get deferred, and how to hiring freeze, that sort of thing. Sarah, remind me, what's our total general fund? 15 million? 17 million. So, $1.5 million out of a $17 million budget is pretty substantial. So as we look at this, we're having immediate things. We're in the process of preparing our budget for next year. And obviously we have some of those deferred costs are creating strain on the budget next year, along with other things. But we really sort of need money. We need money now. And I'll walk through that a little bit. Again, in the memo that this is Sarah LaCroix, by the way. She's the finance director for the city. Got here a little less than a year ago and has had herself one fun year so far. But it is really great. And so these numbers that she put together, you can see we're really looking at about 1.3 million in lost revenues for this current year. And that includes, so Downtown Improvement District is the special taxing district we have in the center of downtown for help support that particular program, the downtown program. So those buildings are the ones that got hit the hardest. So they obviously are seeking abatement. So there's lost DID there. Our local options tax, we have a rooms, meals, and alcohol tax. For several months, our restaurants, or at least most of our restaurants and hotels, our hotel still is closed. Some of our smaller hotels are back in business. And city fees for building permits, any of those types of things that people might normally do, they just didn't do. And to the extent that they were doing building fees, our council generously waived those for people with flood or emergency that we weren't going to add permit fees on top of that, or residents that suddenly had a disaster in their house. So that was a big loss. We estimated about $135,000 in lost parking fees because no one was coming downtown. We certainly weren't giving people tickets for being down there, cleaning up their businesses. And lastly, tax abatements, those are just starting to come in now. We did some analysis of properties that were in the floodplain that we think may have sustained damage and what that would be. So this is a little bit of a statistical estimate, not a hard number. That is close to 890,000. That's from the city's perspective. So as you can see, that's in addition to that, if we had to pay the ed tax for those abated properties, and I do know there's a bill
Yes.
addressing that, but
And it is in here, we will take it up first and next week, I hope. This week, we'll take it up this week, and I would like to have it out by the end of the week.
and I did know, I was aware that that bill was there, and you told me you were introducing it. I wanted to put this in here to give you all the sense of the magnitude of this impact for us. You can see we're looking at 1.3 million in lost city revenues, another 1.2 million in ed tax costs that it would be to the city if we had to pay that for abated properties. It's a major hit. Additionally, we're looking at our share for FEMA right now is about $830,000. That could change if the costs go up, but based on where we're at right now, we're looking at that. So if you total it all up, the flood impact to us is about 3.35 million. You back out the ed tax, which, because I'm sure you're going to pay that in full, it's still looking at $2.3 million. And, as we mentioned, general fund or whatever of 17 million, we don't have that lying around. That, we have other needs as well, like everybody else. And we're just not equipped to take this on. So if there were some sort of relief program, much like the omnibus bill that's been presented with some relief to municipalities, and quickly slapping on my hat as the president of the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, there are many other communities like us that are in this situation. So I would certainly urge that we consider it should not be just for Montpelier, but Montpelier should be first on the list. I also want to point out that, in addition to the direct municipal costs, there are other costs that we can't measure, and I'm sure you will hear about or have heard about, but just I think it's important to say, we have local businesses that closed down. They lost all those months of revenue on top of having to take in COVID loans. They had local employees that were out of work. We have residents who lost homes, residents that have been out of homes. We have even residents that may be in this room that were kept for long periods of time. People had substantial damages that they needed to repair furnaces and raise things up, and not to mention all these costs of rebuilding local buildings to put businesses back. So there are costs far beyond the municipal costs. So to the extent that this bill addresses those needs in other areas, strongly support this to put all of our Vermonters back home. But from the city, if you could take care of the ed tax, we really could use about $2.5 million to make us whole. And that, like I said, that's in this current year. This isn't for balancing next year's budget. This would just need so we don't go belly up, or so that we can actually do like some of the paving and things that we said we were going to do this year. And I do understand paving is an issue.
Senator
Thanks for coming in. Good to see you again.
My pleasure.
Can you tell me, I've lost track of this acronym, ERAF?
I don't know what it stands for.
So we'll get that to you. It has to do with our emergency rating system. We are a very active flood insurance, and we have a very good rating with the National Flood Insurance Program. So that helps reduce our share. It also helps in reduce the cost of flood insurance for residents and businesses here in town, building owners. So as a result, our share, we're estimating is about 7.5%. It's a total 25% share. State has, I think, it's like 10% of it usually, or 15%, and then
I think we're testimony here was that they're confident they're going to get enough to get to the 10%. Is that the goal? That's part of it's in here, either here or economic development. He's been in both.
Right.
He felt confident that we were going to get to that, which is a terrible thing. You're wishing for more damage, but financially it does help.
Right, exactly.
It's that threshold that you need to cross in order to qualify.
Well, so essentially, FEMA funds 75% of the damage. And so there's a 25% match. So, in theory, the municipality state typically has picked up at least 10%, or somehow it's either the state picks up 10% or leaves the municipality with 10%. One of the two.
Yeah.
But then if you have a higher rating, whatever that is.
Emergency relief and assistance fund.
Emergency release assistance fund.
No wonder I didn't know what it was.
So that should again, it's all should because you believe it when you see it, right? We're dealing with federal government and else, but it should reduce at least Montpelier's share 7.5% because of the scoring in that. So that's what we're basing everything on is an estimate. And even that's an estimate because some funds that you get are 100% and some are, it's kind of a composite of a bunch of different funds.
And it's, 7.5%, a good figure. I mean,
Well, it's better than 25%.
Sure.
For our share.
Yeah.
So yes,
Sure.
but it's still a big number and it's still not, kind of thing we have to plan on.
Yeah.
And we have reserves, but that number there would essentially be our entire reserve. So,
Okay.
What's the DID?
Downtown Improvement District. So we have a special tax district in the center, we have a designated downtown. And for commercial buildings, there's a slight property tax surcharge that then goes into specific, so funds can only be used for downtown improvements and promotions and that sort of thing. And because of the abatements to those properties, that is a loss not only to the general fund, but to the downtown improvement district.
Are those funds just recently created to deal with the flood, or are those ongoing?
We've had the DID for, I'm gonna guess 10 years, somewhere. It could be up
We
there.
tried during my time and failed, but I know it has gone in.
Yes. It's been, it's not new.
Yeah, it's been there for quite a while. And does that fund, Montpelier Alive?
Partially, so
It's a good investment considering what they did.
oh yeah, absolutely. So Montpelier Alive does have a specific appropriation from the city budget, then they have membership fees, but this really is supposed to fund specific programs of this or actual projects, help out funding, improvement projects. It's not supposed to be operating costs for them, but I think they do use some of that. And certainly Montpelier Alive was a huge partner with the city this year in responding to the flood, no question about it.
Any other questions?
What I had noted to myself was the lost parking revenue from tickets and from the meters, and thank you for including that.
That'd be great.
Just it's not exactly a financial question, but really, so sort of how's it going? Are you finding people responsive? Are you finding assistance timely? Things like that. At least on the state side of things.
So funny you mentioned that. We're talking about that tomorrow. We've got to go up, but I think generally there's been help. I think like anything during the initial response to the flood, there was some confusion and probably on everyone's end. But yeah, I think how it's going from the city's perspective is that the community is bouncing back, the businesses are bouncing back, but there's still some residual pain to get people out of homes. Our city hall is still half unusable. So I think the FEMA process takes a really long time. I know that's something that you can do. And the states help us navigate that as best as they can, but they don't control FEMA either. So I think that I think the state really right now where we're at it's kind of us and FEMA at this point.
Any, is there a state fund that backs sort of like a grant, a bridge to your FEMA, the arrival of your FEMA money? In other words, like the state says, okay, we're confident you're going to get that money, but it's just slow. So we're going to advance you the money and we'll get repaid later.
We can add that. I would be happy to do. We've taken out
There is a fund, but no.
We've taken out a $6 million loan at about 5% to help out with that. So yeah. if the state wanted to take that over, we'd be happy to look at your deal right now.
Right. I think the chair has that bill already in her back,
In what?
that,
Okay. I think, yeah, we're all gonna do everything we can to get all the money we can. But we're not allowed to make any commitments because we have $100 million in damage. And our revenues are leveling off. And so we've got to see what we can find and maybe what we can raise. There's a couple suggestions out there and see what we can do. But I think what we've learned is this is not a once in 100 years, and we're gonna have to be better prepared beforehand, and we're gonna have to be better prepared to respond afterwards.
And having programs in place and
Yeah.
funds in place for these types of things. I know the businesses really appreciated the relatively quick speed in which money was made available, and municipalities would as well.
Now we need to get people back in. Would be nice to have a hotel.
We hear it's coming.
I know. I heard it was the fire alarms, but they might be fixed now. And elevators have been the bane of every building over 2 stories up. The fire department elevator good?
Fire department doesn't have an elevator.
Okay, it
City
doesn't.
Hall has an elevator and it's not working.
I remember the discussion. We put the addition on about how we had to have an elevator.
We got
We got around
we
that?
got around it because the second floor isn't really, doesn't provide public service.
No, the dormitory.
It's basically where they
Yeah.
sleep and train. So
Okay.
that any service that anyone needed to get from the fire department can get over.
Okay, good.
But City Hall, not so much.
No. Remember putting sandbags around the furnace, trying to keep it going, because in March it was very cold. Okay, any other questions? All right,
Thank you for
Thank you.
hearing this and
Well-
thank you for anything you can do. And I'm more than happy to have the smart half of Washington County provide next. He's got the real presentation. I saw
heard there
what he
were
had, I
30
felt,
slides.
I felt humbled, so.
Thank you for
well,
your
I think,
patience.
I sometimes feel like we're being intrusive, pulling you in here.
Well, it's a long walk, Senator.
I know,
gotta admit.
I know. The one good thing with Zoom is Bennington doesn't have to drive, but, we're gonna do what we can.
Excellent, appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Yes,
you were mentioning the frequency, so this isn't precise, but it's something like the Mississippi has 8 once in 500-year floods in the last 12 years.
oh, yeah. Ask me about frequency normal.
Year, it's 8
Okay.
the new normal,
Screen share.
should be as normal. You should be able to.
Mississippi's got more floodplain open, just fill out.
Yeah.
They don't have mountains in Mississippi.
All of Indiana.
Louisiana Purchase, east of
Okay,
Ohio, not New York.
welcome.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me here.
Just introduce yourself for the record.
Nicholas Torelli Castro, I'm Berry City Manager.
Oh.
Glad to be here. Wish it was under different circumstances, of course.
We do too.
But I brought a PowerPoint. This has been my mode of communicating with the public and our council. And I thought it was just easier just with some of the visuals and to get some of the points across about where we are financially today. It's very grim, Berry City. And so I'll just sort of cut right to it.
Your reps have been very clear with us about how grim it is.
They've been terrific, yeah, they've been very engaged. And so this is probably pretty similar slide for most municipalities, but our budgets are really wages and benefits. So over, 68% of them is the people we hire and employ and who provide the direct services. And then 32% of it is everything else. But even within that, there's a lot of things in that smaller part of the pie that are not, we don't have a lot of discretion over anyway, like debt service, insurance, vehicles, right? Our police and fire vehicles need to gas up. So bottom line, our budget, like many others, are fixed. And then on top of that, the vast majority, 75% of our revenue comes from property taxes. The next largest chunk is city generated revenue, things like rentals at the auditorium, the BOR, our ice skating rink, parking, those kinds of things. But as you can see here, 3/4 of it is our property taxpayers providing our revenues. So the impacts of the flood on our budget have been widespread, touching just about every part of it in the opposite direction of what would be helpful, right? So all the inputs were negatively impacted. Revenue, as you saw, 75% is property tax funded. We had 363 structures damaged by the flood. This number has actually grown now. We're close to 80 properties expected to be substantially damaged. 40 property owners have applied for buyouts. These are all going to end up being potential abatements or loss of grand list value. So this is a big problem for us in that regard. The expenses are an issue for us as well. We have to front all the FEMA projects. So we have about 55 projects identified at $2.7 million. And then besides impacting our expenses, it obviously a huge toll on our cash flow. Our general fund budget is $13.7 million. So looking at just even the $2.7 million for the projects is a big problem for us. We look at buyouts. I mentioned there's 40 property owners that applied for buyout. That comes to $2.5 million for the local share. So we're talking, and the city has to front all of it. So that would be $8 million, assuming we bought everybody out, right? That's more than half of our budget. So all these three inputs just very dramatically impacted by the flood.
Barry has a question.
Oh, yes.
Quick question. So substantially damaged, what's the significance of that term?
So that is it's a term of art for FEMA. It requires a house that's substantially damaged is required to bring up its heat, electrical up above flood-based elevation. So what that means, it's really it's more of a burden for the homeowner because they have that cost. From the city's perspective, what that tells us, it's a proxy for potential abatements, because if a house is substantially damaged, high likelihood that they'll come apply for abatement, high likelihood that we'll lose revenue from it. Yeah.
And if they get FEMA assistance to move everything up, but they do not carry flood insurance, which is very expensive, and we're gonna look at flood insurance and how much we can do about it. If they don't have the money to carry the flood insurance, then the next time it floods, and in this neighborhood of Barry, it's next time. They are not eligible for any FEMA assistance. So people without resources are really in a hard place.
That's exactly right, sir. In fact, we found a lot of our residents in that position this flood.
We had one representative.
One representative, in fact, exactly. And so they were impacted by the 2011 floods, and they didn't raise their structure, or they didn't carry flood insurance. So this time they get nothing from FEMA. So so substantial damage is really a double whammy. It's both high cost to the homeowner and also a revenue issue for the municipality.
And right now, if you abate the taxes, you still owe the school taxes.
Correct. Yes.
We hope to fix that.
Yes, that would be a big relief for us and many others.
In the 40 homes that you're anticipating a buyout for, or that they've applied for a buyout, can you just say how that's funded? Like, is this FEMA with a local match, or?
Yes, it is. So it is FEMA funded with a local match. I believe the local match is 10%. And so what happens, for Barry City, if we bought all 40 out, which is still, it's not likely that we would buy all 40 out, but if we did, I believe the total cost is estimated based on the average assessed value at about $8.5 million. What would happen is the city would have to front all of the $8.5 million up front. We would be reimbursed by FEMA on the back end, which is no easy process. We haven't been reimbursed by FEMA at all for anything yet. And then between the state and the city, we would be responsible for about the $2.5 million local share. So the state has offered to pay some of the local shares thus far. I'm not sure if they'll pay all of them, but we would be, assuming all 40 are bought out, either the state or the city would be on the hook for eventually $2.5 million.
So, but the total bill for the buyouts is 8.5.
8.5, yeah. And that's an estimate that's based on the formula that's been used to estimate this is average assessed value times 30%, because what we pay, what a homeowner would get in a buyout is their fair market value the day before the flood. So that's just a proxy for how an estimate would be calculated.
But FEMA sends in its own appraisers, forensic appraisers, I believe they call
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So it's not a local appraiser who will go in and appraise it, it's
Right.
FEMA.
Does that mean the numbers are typically higher, lower?
I don't know.
Yeah, and for us in Barry, it's hard to estimate. So the way the methodology's been created from one buyout application we have so far, our CLA is quite low right now. We're in the process of going through a citywide reappraisal in 25. So that's why the assessed values that they have on the grand list are not necessarily what they would get as fair market value. That's why they're using that assessed value times 30% or plus 30%.
So like 1.3.
Exactly, 1.3. Yeah.
Okay.
So we were facing headwinds before we even hit the flood. We're a unionized community. We have 4 labor unions representing our municipal staff, and they all had 5% contractual wage increases. I think just about everybody got the 13% healthcare rate increase at the beginning of the year from the Green Mountain Care Board. We had just sort of contractual inflationary increases of $497. That's like things like fuel, just contracts that had inflators built into them. So those were headwinds we were facing. We did identify $93,000 in new non-tax revenue, so we're trying to be really creative in lessening the burden on our property tax owners the most we can. It's not easy, but $93,000 is $93,000 less we need in property taxes.
Is that the new tax on Montpelier, that Barry flood? No, that's a joke. Sorry.
We could. We're open to it.
Tell us a little bit about Barry, your size, your income, because Barry and Montpelier are two
very different
communities.
We are. So we're 8,500 population. Our median income is far lower than the states. We're about $40,000 is our median income. I believe it's $62,000 statewide. Our budget is, as I mentioned, $13.7 million. High tax community. Our budget, it was already kind of really fragile to begin with, and this kind of pushed over the top. It's blue collar community. We have the courthouse. We have Barry Public Housing. North Barry Manor is, I believe, the second tallest building in the state, and it's high-rise low-income housing. A lot of nonprofit housing through Down Street. So really a service center. A lot of challenges, and unfortunately, the neighborhoods that were hit the hardest are the ones with the greatest needs, which is our north end. Yeah.
And when did 40 buyouts go?
Yeah.
Does FEMA help? Now you've got 40 deserted houses. Does FEMA help pay to tear them down?
No, so the buyout, the city would be responsible from the beginning to the end. And so the only role really FEMA plays is moving through the application and ultimately paying their share of it. But the buyout, the $8.5 million I mentioned, includes the cost to demolish and get rid of the debris. So unfortunately, we already had to go through this. We had a home lost to a landslide that was threatening public safety. It was hanging over a street. So we had to demolish that one quickly. And that was the same thing. The city paid up front for all of it. The demolition, the removal of the debris, really expensive because it had asbestos. So we paid, I believe we were just under $200,000 out of pocket to pay for that, and we still are awaiting reimbursement from FEMA for that amount. But yeah, it's a soup to nuts. All of the work is on the municipality. What FEMA does is write a check several months after the fact.
Maybe. We just settled our last FEMA thing from Irene last April.
Yes, and we're in the same boat. The city, the city settled a buyout from I think 2015, just last month. So it takes a long time.
Yeah, and meanwhile you're carrying the cost.
Right, and that's sort of why that red arrow on depleted fund balance. We had a really healthy fund balance, and that was really due to vacancies. Just we struggled to hire. I know the state does, everyone does. So we had vacancies that created savings and fund balance. We've burned through that because we had to do that, like the $200,000 to do the buyout. We're also projecting 3.68% projected loss of grand list value, which is really what is hurting us, right? We've gone through a really in-depth staff exercise to trim this budget. Even after doing so, found $500,000 in savings. Even after then, we were seeing huge tax increases because of the loss on the revenue side. So where we stand today as a city, and this is what I'm presenting to the council tonight, is, as I mentioned, $526,000 in deep cuts. I mean, I'm talking bare bones government. We have, things that people really care about, like yard waste removal. Like, it's gone. We are no longer printing in color. Like, those are the kinds of savings we're looking at everything. So we found $526,000 in cuts. We're looking at, the council told us to target 5% tax increase, which is a lot, even for our community, already high tax. But they said you have to, try to get to around 5%. And so with what we've done now is trying to get to that 5% target. We've restored some of those deep cuts. We're gonna do yard waste pickup, right? Those are the basic things people expect from a government. If we restore some of those deepest cuts, if we get $975,000 in external operational funding, we can have a 4.78% projected tax rate increase. That is still a really bare bones budget for Barrie. As I mentioned, we had headwinds before, our budget was fragile before. This flood just really kicked it over the edge. So this is the formula that gets us to a budget that we hope our taxpayers can live with. It still has deep cuts. It still has loss of services. It still depends on almost $1 million of external operational funding. Even so, we're still at an almost 5% tax rate increase for a community that already struggles with that.
And there'll be a school tax rate.
And there'll be a school on top of it. Yeah.
Is the municipal tax rate higher than the school? I know for a while Barrie's was.
I think it's close. Yeah, I think they're comparable. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they're fairly comparable. They'll be helped a little bit, I know, by the state changes. I'm less familiar with it. I know they'll be helped by the changes that happen at the state level, although our low CLA will offset some of that. So it's unfortunately somewhat of a wash for the resident.
We're looking into the school.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what's going on. And as of this morning, that was the first time I heard the CLA was the problem. So
Yes.
we're trying to, none of us want to pay 18%.
It's a lot.
I live in Montpelier, so
19%.
19, yes, plus the
On
city,
school.
yeah, and plus the city,
The city's right now is only at 3.8.
Yeah.
Right now,
20%. Oh, my hope.
Yeah.
averages.
I think I'm gonna get poor really fast.
Yeah, it's a lot to ask people, and it's people who, went through a lot. Like I said, 363 structures impacted. People have had out-of-pocket expenses. So for us even to ask the 5% is, we know, a burden to our residents. And so this is really more for my council, but these are some of the restorations we made. We restored a planner position. We had cut all of our cemetery seasonal staff. We restored 50% of it. Our library provides such essential social services. We made the sacrifice to restore their funding. And like I said, people really care about yard waste, so we're going to restore that. I think the picture that I'm presenting to our council tonight, and I presented to our staff, and really want to let leave the room with too, is that our budget is still built on a house of cards. We made some really deep cuts. We've restored them because of the target our council gave us. But it's still fewer services than our residents deserve. And even with it still depends on that external assistance. If we don't have that at $975,000 I mentioned in that formula, we're back to deeper cuts. We're back to no yard waste. We're back to eliminating a planner position. We're back to no cemetery seasonal help. And that's not any services at all for what our residents will be paying. So we're exploring, we've issued a hiring freeze. We're prepared to do, layoffs, furloughs, whatever it takes, because if we have that $975,000 gap, we're back to, to the starting point. It's still a tenuous budget.
You're not providing the necessary services for people to live there.
Exactly.
And Okay,
So that's where we are. This is the presentation I'm giving to our council tonight. We've worked really hard to cut where we can, and we hope that with some gap funding, we can provide and present a budget to our voters that can gather support, even though it still results in nearly 5% projected tax rate increase.
but even if we could find money to help you get through this year, you've still got that reduced grand list next year.
Yes, Senator, that's been our fear is that, this is not a one-year problem. Our grand list, 3.68% loss of grand list value is not gonna come back overnight. And so if we're looking at a stopgap this year, we still gonna have to find that some way to make up that 975 next year. Now, hopefully there'll be some recovery. We're really excited about the possibilities on the north end. Those won't happen overnight though. And so we are looking at, it's a multi-year recovery just like it is for our residents and our housing, it's a multi-year recovery for our finances.
Senator Burke.
Just a really quick question on the planner position.
Yes.
I serve on natural resources and energy. We're talking about flooding and managing river corridors. Does your planner address river corridor planning, developing bylaws for hazard areas and all that? Do you already have that kind of, do you have bylaws for that now?
We have those. I mean, we are, we have right now a planner who's also our grants manager and had until recently been our interim assessor. So we do have and our zoning administrator. So it's a person who wore many hats. This planner position would help us do that kind of work and enforce those kinds of regulations more quickly. So one challenge, Senator, that we faced was because our planner wears all those hats, we didn't get out our substantial damage letters until December. And I don't know, Bill, when you were able to get them out, but we struggled to do that because this person does those many positions. I think this planning position is going to help us, recover from the people who are dealing with the flood hazard permits, enforce these bylaws, and help us do these things in a more timely manner.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Anything else you think we should know?
No, I think that, for us, the timing is urgent, I think is what I would leave you with. We are, unless our council moves town meeting day, which is under consideration, our voters will go to vote on a budget in March. And if we don't know sort of what our landscape will be, our voters will really not have a good sense, and neither will we as a staff know what to expect for the coming year. So I think timeliness is really important for us as municipalities and for our voters to know what to expect. Because as I said, this budget, this formula works for us now. It's still challenging, but you take that $975,000 out of it and it's a whole new budget that our voters would be living with.
Where is that external coming from?
That's what we need the state to help with.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the state needs to give you 975.
That's our gap. Yeah, that's our gap to get us to a 4.78% projected tax rate increase. So if we don't have that gap, we either have to make that up in property taxes or in cuts. And so neither option is
Very good.
very good for us.
Is there a program to which you can apply for the 975, or this is just a sort of an extraordinary request? It would be an appropriation.
Yeah, this is an extraordinary request. I think there are, so we've done what we can to create some bandwidth for our finances. So we have a $3 million line of credit. Unfortunately, we've blown through all our fund balance because of having to front costs. All the other programs, FEMA offers some assistance. They're all loans. And so for us, that just sort of exacerbates the issue. So we are, and the timing issue of it as well, is that our voters may be going to, we have to approve a town meeting date ballot on the 31st possibly, and our voters may be voting in March. So we just wouldn't know of some of those other possibilities if they would come through.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Have you received any encouragement from members of any appropriations committee so far?
This is my first foray
Foray here.
into here. I know we've been in very close contact with our two representatives from Berry City. And so we are, but this is my first visit to the legislature this session.
I think with the 17th, we find our revenue estimates for this year, which is what our budget is based on. And we kind of wait and listen for the governor's budget presentation to get a sense as to what he's thinking of doing. I haven't heard anything on flood relief. I know there are a couple folks working really hard on it, but coming up with the money is going to be
Yeah.
a challenge.
And we understand that. I think that, we're, for us, the math is, we know we have to have a balanced budget, and if we don't find a way to fill that $975,000 gap with external assistance, it's an easy formula for us. It's either cuts or tax, and like you said, Senator, neither one is amenable to the residents,
Yeah.
voters. Yeah,
Anyway, okay.
How many people?
8,500 population.
You have come down then.
Yeah.
You used to be 15,000.
Yes.
Wow. And Berrytown has grown.
Berrytown is, I think together with Berrytown, probably close to 15,000.
Yeah.
I think they're about 7 and change.
Montpelier was always 8, we've lost a couple hundred. We were 8.
We gained,
What?
we got to 7,800, we're back up to
Oh, you up to
8,000 even.
Oh, well, we were at 8,342.
We were.
Not too long ago.
Then we went to 7,800, now we're back to 800.
We need housing,
We need
but
that.
that's the other committee. But
We'll
yeah,
be
we
back to
could
talk
do
about
some
that.
replacement housing in Barry.
Yes.
But we can't where it's gone because that is floodplain.
Yeah, and we're excited about that. I know that the governor's released some conceptual visions for the north end.
But no money.
No money, and I think, but I think the concepts make sense, which is we need floodplain and we need dense, elevated urban housing.
Yeah.
That's what the north end needs, one way or the other. I mean, there's other projects that have been talked about. There's potential for infill. So there's, we put a parking lot out for bid to get some housing, and so that'll help. Those are the
Yeah.
kinds of things that'll help us. That parking lot could generate 40 units of housing, and it's right in the downtown, so it's a really exciting possibility. But those things won't happen overnight, but there's certainly a lot of opportunity.
Okay, just getting through this year. Thank you, Barry.
So I want to make sure I heard that right. Berry City was once 15,000,
I believe at some point, I don't know
Yeah.
when that was, but yes.
and now you're 8.5.
Yeah.
So that's 6,500 less. Why is there a housing shortage?
So the 15,000, I don't know how long ago that was, but that was quite some time ago. I think a lot of it's been,
20 years,
it's,
maybe 30.
yeah, I think a lot of the housing has been lost, from development. We have, in my opinion, not everyone agrees with it. I think we have too many parking lots, but I think that's one of the housing has been lost to that. So
Well,
those are the,
you used to, on my street, we had our own school bus. You had 6, 7, 8, 10 kids in a house. Now you have 1.5 people in a house. And so your population stays the same, but you need more housing.
right.
You don't put 5 kids in a
The other
room.
development challenge for Barry is that we're only 4 square miles. And much of the 4 square miles is in the floodplain.
Yes.
And the part that's on the floodplain is on ledge. And so the development is a real big challenge. That's why we're really excited about this parking lot, because it could take an underused piece of property owned by the city and turn it into housing.
Yeah, and Berrytown has grown. I mean, it's the typical Vermont downtown. It got very expensive, so people moved out and up generally. And Berrytown is where all the nice new housing is right now.
And they have room to grow.
Yeah, they do. They're out of the floodplain.
No, I'm getting over this.
Yeah. And they gave me an earful last year on the housing bill.
I did say.
So, other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you.
Thank you so much, thank you.
Good luck with your city council,
Thank you,
both
Good
of
looking
you.
presentation.
thank you, I appreciate it.
Your council's been here all day. They were
Yeah,
here
we
this
do.
morning.
Thank you all, I appreciate it.
Thank you. And all I can tell you is, you understand, we'll do whatever we can.
Thank you.
You got two major cities in Central Vermont, the world to hurt.
I have heard the word surcharge.
We are going to appropriations.
Yeah. Okay, committee, I think that's it for this afternoon. Tomorrow we're gonna start going through all the bills. Yes, tomorrow we do have the 160, which is, the forgiveness of the requirement that those towns pay the school tax on the, houses that they've abated. So we can at least give them that little bit of relief, get that through. The earlier the better, so they can set their town meeting. We're gonna start looking at the bills that have come to us, so we can start making decisions. I think we're gonna be dragging little by little out in several committees, trying to figure out what's going on with the school tax and what we can do. This morning, someone in the hall told me the problem was the CLA, and someone else told me that the 5% cap that we put on the waiting budget, that somebody had, the Department of Ed said that was on the residential, but it had to be made up in the non-homestead tax. I think we need to find out what is going on, and see how that's impacted. So, I do have a meeting tomorrow morning in the speaker's office to talk about waiting. Maybe someone has figured out more how that's playing this year. But as far as I can tell, we've got a couple of heavy years, both for the schools and for the towns. And, well, I don't like to have everybody in because they're in economic development in the morning and they're in gov operations and they have things to do. But there's a lot of towns that are hurting like this and have no full-time staff, no idea. These guys are struggling. They've got staff. The little guys, we had Weston and Londonderry and Jamaica in. Where do you start with FEMA? And they don't have the money to upfront anything. So we have a problem. I mean, it keeps snowing, but it stopped. I'm hoping
It's snowing a little bit there.
it was
Yeah, I
snowing a
can
little.
see it when, waiting for me to leave.
That
Start
we
again.
can all get here tomorrow morning and that nothing bad happens. I think we can go off with those cheery thoughts.